afternoon. I'm Sean Askham, member of the Simsbury Board of Selectmen, and I'm pleased to be joined today by Senator Kevin Witkos. Kevin, thanks so much for being here.
Great to be here with you.
Appreciate you stopping in and taking a little bit to talk to me here.
Sure, absolutely.
Just want to talk to you about your background, talk to you about some issues that you're hearing on the campaign trail, what you're looking to do when you're reelected for your next term as the 8th senatorial district senator, and just what you're seeing overall. So if you could start with just a little bit more about your background for the folks that may not know you as well here in Simsbury.
Sure. Well, these shows will be aired just before the election, and people are paying a lot of attention to the candidates this year. And I hope that over the past 4 years representing Simsbury in the General Assembly in the State Senate, I've done well enough that people know who I am. But for those of you who might have moved into town or don't know about me, my name is Kevin Witkos, and I reside in the neighboring town of Canton. I'm married to my wife, Esther. We've been married for 17 years now, and we have 2 children, Kira and Casey, both teenagers. And I was just recently retired from the police department. I served as a sergeant. Thank you. I served as a sergeant in the police department in Canton for 23 years, and I was on the volunteer fire department in Canton for 10. Right. And now I started my own small business. My wife and I, we are trying to we bought an old building that was built in the 1900s, and we're refurbishing it. If you know Collinsville at all, it's the old Fireplace Cafe. And we are naming it Wilson's Pub after the late owner who ran it from 1964 to 2005.
Excellent.
And so we hope to hire 10 or 15 employees. And I tell you, it's an eye-opener trying to start your own small business in this town because, number one, there's no one-stop shopping. And number two, the tax man's standing right there wanting that $250 small business entity tax check as soon as you haven't even opened your doors yet.
You haven't even started and they're already coming for the
We'll
taxes.
be talking about that later on in the interview today.
Absolutely.
But it's been a great ride for me. I served 5 years in my local Board of Education in Canton, and then I served for 6 years as a state representative before being elected under the great, when Tom Hurley retired. I ran for his position and have been serving in the state Senate now for 4 years. So this is my 3rd term in the Senate.
Excellent. Well, we really appreciate all your past service, not only for Simsbury, for the entire district. What are you hearing on the campaign trail? What are the issues that people are talking to you as you're going door to door, as you're out meeting folks?
Well, I think every single candidate that's out there is talking about jobs in the economy, but right. I don't really hear jobs that much. I hear the economy and the economic factors, the taxes, right, and the wasteful government spending. That seems to be the key that people are complaining about. Not only homeowners, people that are in the grocery stores, small businesses, they're complaining that the state is just taking too much money and spending them on superfluous, crazy ideas like the new Britain to Hartford busway, $600 million, and people might have heard it was $957 an inch.
Right. Now
that's just wasteful government spending. And the story that's not being told about that is it will only require a $20 million subsidy from the state if we reach 16,000 riders a day. Now, I can't, not a weatherman, right, not an actuary, but I'd be safe to predict that we're not going to see 16,000 riders on that bus every single day. So if we don't have that, the subsidy is going to increase even that much further.
That's definitely troubling. I mean, in coming off the largest tax increase in the state's history, that does not bode well for us here. So,
well, part of the problem is when politicians speak and they're out on the campaign, the stump. I hope people ask those hard questions because somebody's out there saying that Governor Malloy cut $700 million out of the budget. BS. That's what I said. BS. If you look, spending has increased 5.2% over the past 2 years. Right. Under his administration, there was no cuts. When people are saying a cut in political terms, they're saying, I'm asking for $100, I'm only getting $70, so I cut $30. No, you didn't. You got $70 increase.
That's not a cut.
It's not a cut. So when the candidates, including myself, pin us down, ask us those tough questions. How did you vote on this? How would you vote on this? And whenever somebody says, I want to do this for you, you want to ask them, how are you going to pay for it? Because it's easy to promise a lot of different things, but you've got to have a plan to pay for those things. Otherwise, the plan is no good.
Right.
Because you look around, there's no money. There's absolutely no money. People are taxed out. As you mentioned earlier, $1.6 million tax increase, the largest in the history of the state of Connecticut.
Right. Billion.
Yeah, 1.6 million.
It's so staggering the number that it's easy to say million, but it's billion, right?
Billion, right. 1.6 billion. And We're only 3 months into the new fiscal year. We're already facing a $27 million deficit. So
Right.
extrapolate that out for another 9 months.
Right.
We're on an unsustainable path.
Right.
We're on a fiscal cliff, as they say.
So I mean, it's extremely disappointing. Now I know that you and others from the Republican caucus did present an alternative budget the last time around, and obviously that wasn't accepted. What were your thoughts on that process, and what can we do going forward?
Well, I think I have a plan that's going to bring financial stability back to Connecticut, and we can make Connecticut great once again.
Mm-hmm.
But the plan cannot include picking winners and losers,
Right.
is what this administration does. He dangles $100 million over here, $20 million over here to certain companies, and then they become the winners. So you're pitting private businesses against private businesses, and the state's determining who's going to win and who's going to lose.
Right.
We saw that at the national level, and it doesn't work.
Right.
Government needs to get out of the way and let the private enterprise grow and expand. And there will be some losers, because some people, whether their marketing's not right, or the product they're producing isn't right, or there's just no there's no customers that want that anymore. So
Right. But the market decides that, not the government, right?
exactly,
I mean, that's
let the
difference.
market decide.
Right.
So number one, we have to stop picking winners and losers. The one bill, if I was asked, what do you regret? If you could take back one vote, what vote would you take back? And I voted for the Governor's First Five program, because when it was explained to me, it made sense that we're going to offer some government incentive, tax incentives for these businesses to come to Connecticut, relocate to Connecticut, and create at a minimum 200 jobs.
Okay.
So for a small investment from the government side, well, let's lure these companies in. But then what happened? We saw ESPN, we saw Cigna, we saw StubHub, all these companies that are already existing in Connecticut get these millions and millions and millions of dollars.
Right.
And so I felt like I was sold a bill of goods. And then I saw other things that have been rammed down the legislature's throat. And I'll give you an example, Jackson Labs. If
Right.
people forget what that is, that's the company that produces mice for laboratory testing up in Maine. And they wanted to expand their business by doing individual medicines. So they thought they'd go to Florida because it's a better business environment in Florida. Taxes are low.
Right.
You can get more workers for less. And so the Florida legislature looked at what their demands were. And over a course of 2 years, they studied it, and they said, this is not what's best for the Florida taxpayers. We would lose in this instance. So they pulled it off the table. But what happens? The governor's chief of staff is on vacation in Maine and sees the article. So he calls up, and within 2 weeks, they're already here in Connecticut. A bill is pushed forward, and it's passed, and we've just spent, $700 million for a company that, well, it's $300 million for the company itself. There's other things added on to it, but
Right.
they have to create 300 jobs, and they have 10 years to do it. So we're paying $1 million a job.
Right.
That is not a good investment on taxpayers' dollars.
No.
And the contract that was signed said that if you were a full-time employee, and you could be a subcontractor, and work for a minimum of 35 hours for a 3-week period, that would be counted as a job. So if Jackson Labs hired somebody to maintain the property, and they worked at least 35 hours, and they were employed during the 3-week period when they did that labor count, that counted as one of the 300 jobs.
Yeah.
Certainly not worth $1 million per
No.
job.
And I'm sure that didn't come out before the vote, with limited information, limited time.
Absolutely not.
And in this climate, we need economic development. We need businesses in our entire state, but particularly in the 8th District. So,
Well, one of the things that the problem is, Sean, is that the state is being run through a one-party rule system
Right.
right now, and that is not conducive to good debate. It's not conducive to transparency. A recent issue that's just been popping in the past few days, if folks aren't aware about it, was the initiative by the governor to condense the hierarchy of the colleges in the state of Connecticut. So the legislature created the Board of Regents, and they took the 4 state colleges, Western, Eastern, Charter Oak, the online college, and all the 12 community colleges, and they created this board to oversee them. And most recently, the governor's choice to be the executive director of the Board of Regents authorized his second in command, if you will, a $49,000 pay raise.
Right.
And in the meantime, the only reason why that came to light is because the executive director sent a letter to all the college presidents that said, this is the game plan. You either follow this game plan or you agree to this buyout plan. We want you out of here.
Right.
And it wasn't until one of the presidents of the college came up and said, time out, I'm going to the press on this. You're forcing us out. And there was backpedaling by the administration. They said that we didn't say that. That's not true. And then another college president, locally, Barbara Douglas up in Winsted that runs Northwest Community College, said, no, that is exactly true. Because I got one of those letters as well. And so then there was people started looking, and the governor was doing an about face saying, I don't own that. That's a whole independent board. We don't have any oversight over them. So
Okay.
There's no transparency there. And
Right.
you know, that's what's happening under the one-party rule system.
Absolutely. I mean, and it's disappointing. I mean, here in Simsbury, we have an equal share on the Board of Selectmen. There are 3 members from the Republican Party and 3 members from the Democratic Party. And we get along because we have to work together, and all ideas are shared, and we compromise. So I hope that the state legislature can become more balanced and perhaps learn from Simsbury. And
I wish we would learn from all the boards of selectmen and the town councils, because they do a better job of managing the taxpayer's dollar than that up at the state. I don't know what happens from the time that I always kid around to my Democratic friends and I say, you know, you guys are all like Republicans, really, because you want a lean, small, efficient government. You're not telling all your town employees, well, we're going to give you all these big raises, and
Right.
we're not going to vote on it, and we're not going to raise your taxes at the local level, because everybody voted down in a referendum.
right.
But something happens between the time that they go from a town official to a state official. I think they forget about, they have to answer to the folks back home. That's why some of these things get passed that us back home sit there and shake our head and say, who would vote for this?
Right.
And, you know, everybody's a nice person, but you've got to really look at how they vote. And that's what should determine, you know, whether you should vote for them or not. And that includes myself.
Right.
I put myself in that category, saying, if you don't like the votes that Kevin Witkos has been voting, throw him out and put somebody else in his place.
Right.
And that's democracy. But you've got to educate yourself. And I want to talk about one other thing. I hear that's going around the district is the 2011 jobs bill.
Right. That's been a topic that's come up a number of times recently.
Well, you know what? I was the only state senator to vote against that bill, and I proudly voted against it. And I'll tell you the reason why. Number one, we debated in about 8 hours. We spent $1 billion of taxpayers' money. $1 billion, which we do not have.
Which coincidentally was the same as the increase on the taxes side.
Right. Secondly, there's a provision in the jobs bill which removed the legislative oversight on how the money is spent. It gives it all to the executive branch. So the governor has carte blanche to pick whomever company he wants to choose and give them umpteen millions of dollars without any say by the legislature.
All
And
right.
I think that is totally wrong when we're removing a checks and balance that we have in our state.
Right.
And lastly, which never got any play from anybody, you know, I actually read the bills before I vote on them. There's a provision in the bill that says if you want to participate in one of the credits for hiring employees, number one, there's a 2-pronged test. Your city or town has to have a population greater than 80,000.
Right.
So we don't pass that test here in Simsbury.
Nope.
Or number two, you have to have unemployment either greater than or equal to the state unemployment rate. The state unemployment rate is 9.2%. Simsbury is under 7. So we don't, none of the towns in the 8th district even meet that end. So we spent $1 billion. I wouldn't support that when it does not benefit any of the 11 towns in the senatorial district.
Which is disappointing. It's great that we have lower unemployment here, but again, we're spending our hard-earned tax dollars that we send over the hill every day, and we're not getting anything back for it.
Where do they go? They go to Bridgeport, Hartford, New Haven,
Right.
and now Stamford.
Right.
I mean, if you look at the number of companies that are receiving the taxpayer dollars, the ones that are earned in this district, where are they going? You know, we can draw our own conclusions on that one.
Right. It's very disappointing. So going forward, what are your priorities in the upcoming legislative session? What are you looking to do?
Well, I think our first priority is to get our financial house in order, because our credit rating was downgraded, and our credit rating is done by Moody's. They rate government. They apply you a number to your town, and that determines if you have a great number. That means you can borrow money for bonding and major projects. at a smaller interest rate. And if you have a low rating, it costs you more money to borrow the money. So that's it's important to have a good credit rating, just like you do in your own home. If you have a exceptionally high number and you go get a credit card, you may only be paying 12% on an interest rate, whereas if you have a really crummy one, you may be paying 24%.
Right.
So it really matters. We need to create a better business climate in Connecticut.
Okay.
We need to streamline some of our permitting processes. We need to remove some of the taxes that our businesses are required to pay.
Right.
As part of the governor says the state of Connecticut's open for business, and all the Democrats say, we're pro-business, but they're the ones that put the 20% corporate surcharge on just our businesses this past year in the budget. So when we're taxing specifically targeting our businesses, that doesn't ring open for business to me.
No, it doesn't.
And that's why I say you gotta ask how we're gonna do this. And my plan is to take the 2010 spending level, and we're gonna work off of that.
Okay.
And from there, we're gonna start paying, when our actuaries tell us you need to fully fund the employee pensions, we're gonna fully fund the number that they give us. Right? And then we have to have the state employees come to the bargaining table and work with us, because they've got to be part of the solution. All new employees, so it's not affecting anybody who has a job now, but anybody that's newly hired is going to be on a defined contribution plan.
Right.
Not a defined benefit plan, but a defined contribution plan, like a 401k, where most of the private sector has gone to. And I know most of the Simsbury town hall employees and the employees in town of Simsbury are on a 401k plan.
We just approved a union contract last night just for that, to introduce our 401k, and then additionally to ask for additional contributions from our employees for health, for retirement, as we recognize the uncontrollable costs in that regard. So it's again a lesson I hope that the legislature can learn from the small towns. That these costs are astronomical at the local level, and at the state level, we're the 49th, 50th worst state in the nation from a pension liability standpoint.
We are, on many standpoints,
Yeah.
we are rated last.
Right.
And that is not something to be proud of. We live in probably one of the best locations in our country.
We do.
I talk about, we have the mountains, we have the beaches. Look at the pictures behind you. We have the history, the fall foliage. We don't have really the natural disasters that mudslides, hurricanes, tornadoes, typhoons. We have a nor'easter every now and then, but
October.
24 hours later, the roads are clear from the snow, but we can't get people to move here. And why is it? Because it's too expensive to live here.
Right.
And it's too expensive because we make it tough for businesses.
Right.
So once we hit our businesses, hit them in a soft way, in a nice way, by removing some of these regulations and some of these costs of doing business in our state, they'll come here, and then there'll be more jobs for the people, and we can start ratcheting things backwards.
Right.
We took a hit. A lot of people think the Democratic Party is for the working guy. Well, the Democratic Party this past budget kind of gave it to the middle class family.
My taxes went up.
Everybody's did.
Right.
The governor reduced, if you own a home, the property tax credit went from $500 you used to get down to $300. He created 3 new brackets in the personal income tax, targeted specifically at the middle class. And I'm not making this stuff up. That's the facts. You go
it's in the
look.
budget.
You'll see it. And then the other thing is, never happened before in the history, once again, and it's certainly not anything to be proud of, is we said, come August 1st, we're going to make your taxes retroactive to January 1. So now you're paying 12 months worth of taxes in a 5-month period. And a lot of the businesses that had automatic payroll didn't know how to deal with that.
They weren't set up for it.
It was a mess.
My company wasn't set up for it. Yeah, I was actually overtaxed for the last few months. It was disappointing. It was tough.
Yeah, and there's just so many different things that I think we need to, like I said, go back to the 2010 spending level and really start going through some of the programs that we offer at the state level. I'm certainly willing to offer a helping hand to those that need it, but only to those that need it.
Right.
And it's not forever. I think that's part of the problem was years ago, I hear stories from my dad and my grandpa from years ago that if somebody fell in difficult times, somebody tried to give him money for something, I don't want your money, because they had the pride that they wanted to earn it themselves. But today, today's day and age, their hands are out.
Right.
And you know what? You have to help, but eventually it has to stop. You have to be self-sufficient.
Yeah, we got to work on creating more opportunities and less programs, right?
Right.
I mean, it's really what it comes down to. All right. What else are you hearing on the campaign trail? You know, we've talked a lot about issues, about your prior service, about what you're looking to do forward. But I think what resonates most with folks is what you're hearing out there. I mean, you spend a ton of time here in Simsbury, and we really appreciate that. You know, because as you referenced earlier, it's important to be local to understand, so that you're connected to our voters, you're connected to our taxpayers. What else are you hearing from folks in town?
Well, I think part of the problem that I hear about is education funding as well. The state, my goal would be to make education, the state's share, 50%. So we start whittling away at some of the things that is the niceties and the things that we're required to do under the Constitution, which is provide a free public education. Government, that's our role as government, and we're failing at the state level. In fact, these past 2 years, we've provided less money than we had in the previous 10 years. We're only funding at 37%. And that goes right back to the individual property tax owners who have to make up the difference at the local level.
Right.
And for those legislators, both state reps and senators, that said, well, we held the towns harmless because we flat funded you. Well,
it didn't help.
You know, it's been the same since 2009. And if you could go back and rewind the tapes, when the Republican Party said, listen, the president came up with these ARRA monies and gave it to the state. And the state says, oh, great, that's $14 million. We can put that towards education. Then we can use our education money. We can use it for something else. That was only a one-time shot. So that's why when people say the ECS formula is not working, we don't have an ECS formula right now in the state of Connecticut.
Okay.
It's been put off to the side, and we've been appropriating by town the amount of money each town's getting. It's the same as you got in 2009 on purpose, because no legislator will go back to the community and say, sorry, I brought you less money for education this year.
Right.
It wouldn't happen. So they're individual appropriations. I'm hoping that the task force that is working now on the ECS formula to come out in January is a true improvement, and it targets those communities that need it and is fair to all the taxpayers in the state. But just throwing money after the problem isn't going to address the problem. And these inner city schools that have these high achievement gaps, I think the problem's from 3 o'clock in the afternoon until 7 o'clock the next morning, because you don't know what kind of support system these kids have when they go home, or even if they have really a home to go to. I don't blame the teachers at all.
Right.
I think when the kids arrive at school, some of them are fed breakfast. If they have a uniform at school, they're given a uniform.
They're safe.
Lunch, they're safe. They're in a protected environment. If they do a latchkey after school, so it's when they go home that we have to focus on that particular area, and that's when we'll start seeing some of the achievement gap. But keeping to throw more money into the schools isn't going to improve education in our state. And the last thing about education was the cost of special education. As somebody who is a member of the Board of Selectmen in Simsbury, you must hear from, during your budget seasons from the Board of Education, how one student moving into the district, which is severely handicapped and requires special services, could blow out a special education budget. And you can't plan for that, because you don't know. People are very mobile nowadays, the cost. So I think the state needs to pick up a little bit more of their share of the cost of special education.
To help that, I mean, in Simsbury, we're very blessed. We have a fantastic special education program here. We have a lot of money allocated towards it, but that would make a real difference here in town if the state was able to help us in those expenditures. So,
well, Simsbury, really, they put their money where it counts, and you see that on every assessment that comes out when schools are rated. Simsbury is constantly #1.
Yes, we are.
Congratulations.
We enjoy that. I'm a product of that school system, so I wear that badge of honor very, very proudly. So,
yeah, and so we talked about taxes, we talked about education. One of the things that doesn't seem to get a lot of play, but it's coming up now more so, is the early release of prisoners.
Yes.
For good time credit. Well, now we're giving good time credit. You're in jail. Okay, you, as far as I'm concerned, I guess I'm a little old school. Maybe that's my law enforcement background. If you're committing a crime, you do the time.
Right.
And in order to, I think, to save money, because once we can start reducing our prison population, it costs less money.
Right.
And we're giving good time credit for people that are in jail that are supposed to be taking classes, but now we're finding out that they're getting credit for being on a waiting list. And it's just not right. And some of these are very violent felons. It was pointed out during the debates.
Right.
So either the legislator that says, I didn't know that was in there, either wasn't paying attention, or...
How do you not know that's in there? You got to read the legislation, right? I mean, that's disappointing. I mean, in light of some of the tragedies we've had in this state.
Most recently, the past couple of weeks.
That was shocking with the home invasions, with the repeat offenders. It was shocking that bill did pass. That was disappointing to see. So Kevin, what else would you like to share with the Simsbury voters and the voters in the 8th District here before we wrap up our conversation?
Well, I want to thank everyone for their past votes for sending me to Hartford. I try to do the best job that I can in representing you back home. I will not vote for a bill that I haven't read. The reason why I voted against the education bill that came out, it passed unanimously in the State House of Representatives. And there were 4 of us, I think, that voted against it up in the Senate. And the reason why, it was a Friday night, it was about midnight, and the Democrats said, well, we're going to be voting on the big education bill in an hour. And so we got handed a 277-page bill. And I read to about, I speed read, so I got up to about page 75. And I saw 2 things in there I really didn't like, but I could have voted for the bill. But I didn't know what was in the other 125 pages. So I said, I can't support something I wasn't even given the opportunity to read. Right. I said, so on principle, I said, I'm not going to vote. Unlike members of Congress who, vote for something so then they'll know what's in it.
We'll find out afterwards, right?
Yeah. I won't do that. So I voted against it, and then I had the opportunity to read it, and I would have supported it had it come out, given the opportunity to read it just like everybody in the House was. So it wasn't the last night of session, so there was no rush that we had to have it done that night. So, I think that in my role as your state senator, I listen to your concerns. I think I do a good job of representing the district up there, making sure that I always think back of how would everybody in Simsbury and the other parts of the district think how they would want me to vote. And that's the deciding factor for my votes. But again, right now, it's purely a fiscal cliff. And if we don't get our house in order, the structure is just going to fall apart in the state of Connecticut, because there's going to be more people that are going to want to be the haves than the have-nots, or the have-nots will outnumber the haves, and that's a dichotomy we do not want to see in the state. We will not be able to get ourselves out. Right. Sooner or later, you keep digging, you're not going to be able to throw the dirt out, and you're just going to be throwing the dirt back on yourself, and we've got to bury ourselves.
Got to get our house in order, absolutely.
And that's what's happening. So that's my number one goal, is to get our fiscal house in order. We need to do something with the education formula. We got to get tough on crime, and with those things falling in place, we'll start bringing jobs back, people going back into the cities because they're afraid. Right. We live out in the suburbs for a reason. When you hear people getting shot or stabbed, drive-bys in Hartford or Bridgeport, New Haven, you're almost not surprised. If that happened in Simsbury, oh my goodness,
we did. We had a recent tragedy in Simsbury, and I mean it was absolutely terrible and shocking. But
it'd be the talk of the town. But when it happens in the city, people just another unfortunate incident. So we've got to make our city safe so people want to go there, and that'll address a whole bunch of public transportation issues and urban sprawl, and so they kind of all fall in line. But the number one issue is getting our financial house in order.
Absolutely. All right, well, sir, I appreciate your time.
It's been a
today.
pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Very good.
Best of luck on November 6th when all the folks go to the poll. I urge you to vote for Senator Kevin Witkos. Thank you.
Thank you.